Meetings. Whether you're attending one or running one, they are a huge test for so many professionals learning business English. For most businesses, meetings mean information distribution through communication. So naturally, we need to know the right expressions to use at the right point in the meeting, so we don't sound too basic or too formal. Building up a bank of well-practiced phrases to use during meetings is a must-have for all professionals. It will allow you to sound more professional and competent, but most importantly, it will allow you to stay in control of the meeting and the message. On this episode of the Business English Podcast, we are going to take a deep dive into the phrases you can use when in meetings, whether you are attending it or running it. And of course, in this day and age, meetings are being conducted online more than ever. So, we're going to mix in a few phrases for when, we encounter a few technical issues. This is your one-stop shop for business English phrases for meetings. Cue the music. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Business English Podcast, helping professionals communicate more effectively, more confidently, and with impact. With your host, Rob, from Energetic English. Let's get down to business. As ever on the Business English Podcast, we yearn for simplicity and structure. So to that end, we're going to segment these awesome phrases for meetings into 12 useful sections. 12 sections, you say? Is that really necessary? Well, yes. I'd like you to reflect on the last time you were in a meeting and recall how many different phrases are required to carry out certain actions in a meeting. For example, a welcome, clarification, summary, or even to put a stop to unnecessary discussion and move the meeting back to more productive topics. All these actions require the correct expression that is accepted amongst the international business community and that doesn't seem out of place or rude. So here are the 12 sections. Number 1, welcoming, for welcoming participants to a meeting. 2, introducing, for introducing the participants to a meeting. 3, framing, for laying out the objective of the meeting. 4, timetabling, for providing the order of events in the agenda. 5, updating, for updating the attendees of the meeting on a particular topic. 6, transitioning topics, for moving from one item on the agenda to another. 7, maintaining focus, to refocus attention when the meeting drifts off topic. 8, requesting input, for politely encouraging input from particular attendees. 9, summarising, to summarise at the end of a meeting. 10, closing, for closing a meeting down. 11, input. This section is designed specifically for allowing you to express your clear and concise messaging into a meeting. And finally, 12, technical, for when things aren't going according to plan from a technical perspective. Each section will begin with the intended use for the following list of phrases within that section, before offering up a couple of relevant phrases for you to learn, repeat, and take note of. For example, firstly, the phrases will be given twice in isolation, giving you the chance to repeat them back out loud. Then, an example will be given so you can see how it's used in practice where appropriate. Right, let's crack on with the first section. First up, phrases for welcoming attendees to a meeting. These phrases get the meeting off on the right foot, providing a welcoming and professional atmosphere in addition to formally signalling the start of the meeting, perhaps after a period of small talk. So, 3 phrases here. First, I'd like to welcome you all. First, I'd like to welcome you all. I'd like to thank you all for being here on time. I'd like to thank you all for being here on time. I wish to thank you all for coming at such short notice. I wish to thank you all for coming at such short notice. Like we said, this is a nice, clean and professional way to start the meeting, clearly signifying that we are going to get down to business. Next up, phrases for introducing participants. These phrases are especially useful as we often have new faces at meetings, and it is pertinent to ensure all attendees know who everybody else is. This sets the conditions for a productive and more accurate meeting as attendees know who they are addressing in the room, so to speak. Okay, the three phrases here are: could everyone begin by briefly introducing themselves? Could everyone begin by briefly introducing themselves? Before we begin, let's take a moment to introduce ourselves. Before we begin, let's take a moment to introduce ourselves. I'd like to start by introducing. I'd like to start by introducing. For example, this last one, I would like to start by introducing James. James is Head of Research and Development at Jewelmine Limited. As you can see, these phrases should follow shortly after the beginning of the meeting to allow everyone to become properly acquainted to the other personalities around the table. Now that everybody has been properly introduced, we must now give the meeting a purpose in order to ensure everybody pulls in the same direction. Framing the meeting is especially important as it helps dispel any ambiguity that may have arisen through a meeting being called last minute or any rumours that may have come to the fore. So, to properly present a meeting's aim or objective, we could use the following phrases. By the end of today's meeting, we need to. By the end of today's meeting, we need to. For example, by the end of today's meeting, we need to decide on the location of the next project. I've scheduled this meeting so that we. I've scheduled this meeting so that we. For example, I've scheduled this meeting so that we can determine the new deadline for the contractors. The purpose of today's meeting is. The purpose of today's meeting is. The purpose of today's meeting is to agree on which date the new management team should take over. These phrases help give a clear purpose to the meeting and allows clarity of discussion for all attendees. We must now briefly cover one of the most important elements of a meeting, and that is the agenda. Briefly outlining the agenda using the correct expressions is so important for attendees, as it not only helps with the clarity of the meeting, but also helps prepare the attendees for what is to come. Some useful expressions here are: firstly, we will be discussing. Firstly, we will be discussing. For example, firstly, we will be discussing the new flexible working hours. After that, we will move on to. After that, we will move on to. For example, after that, we will move on to the subject of working from home. If there's enough time, we will go through. If there's enough time, we will go through. For example, if there's enough time, we will go through the new systems allowing us to work from home. Finally, we're going to discuss. Finally, we're going to discuss. For example, finally, we're going to discuss the block holiday periods for the forthcoming financial year. Using these select phrases allows us to clearly lay out the order of events for the attendees so everybody can begin the meeting on the same page. Right, let's move on now to phrases that help us to update the attendees at the meeting. So, to begin with, in order to request some form of update, we could use the following phrases. How is the project coming along? How is the project coming along? Rob, can you let us know what is happening with the Business English Skills course? Rob, can you let us know what is happening with the Business English Skills course? I suggest we start with Rob updating us on the Business English Skills course. I suggest we start with Rob updating us on the Business English Skills course. Now, to give an update in a meeting, you could use the following phrases. Regarding last month's reports, I would like to highlight that. Regarding last month's reports, I would like to highlight that. In terms of a quick update, I would like to say that. In terms of a quick update, I would like to say that. Using these aforementioned phrases will allow you to clearly highlight specific information that you require an update on. Once you have finished with a particular topic within a meeting, we need a set of phrases to move the conversation on to the next item on the agenda. I would recommend using the following phrases. I think that covers it. Let's move on to the next topic. I think that covers it. Let's move on to the next topic. If nobody has anything else to say, let's press on with the next topic. If nobody has anything else to say, let's press on with the next topic. Okay, now we've bottomed out that issue, let's move on to the next item on the agenda. Okay, now that we've bottomed out that issue, let's move on to the next item on the agenda. These phrases are great for keeping a clear line between previous and upcoming topics, in turn managing the expectations of the attendees and providing that all-important structure. Now, there comes a time in almost every meeting when the course of discussion begins to drift off track. Conversations pertaining to things outside the main objective of the meeting or outside the items of the agenda. In this instance, we need a couple of phrases to sharpen the focus of the meeting and get the conversation back on track. These expressions are perhaps some of the most useful we're going to discuss on today's podcast, as they allow you to politely and professionally affect the course of the conversation. So, in this instance, a couple of suggestions here could be: can we continue this discussion later and get back to? Can we continue this discussion later and get back to? For example, can we continue this discussion later and get back to the matter at hand? Getting back to the topic. Getting back to the topic. For example, getting back to the topic of pay on weekends. Let's park this for the moment and pick it up again later. Let's park this for the moment and pick it up again later. We're getting off topic here. Can we go back to? We're getting off topic here. Can we go back to, for example, we're getting off topic here. Can we go back to flexible working hours? Okay, let's get back to the point here. As we've already said, these expressions can come in very handy when you're in a meeting, so make sure you memorize a couple of them to help you out the next time the conversation feels as if it's drifting off track. Now, during the course of a meeting, it is commonplace to request the input of attendees at that meeting. So let's look at a few phrases that allows us to request input from your fellow attendees. So, for example, I'm now going to hand over to James, who can share more on this topic. I'm now going to hand over to James, who can share more on this topic. Now, Rob, will you tell us more about... Now, Rob, will you tell us more about... For example, now, Rob, will you tell us more about this new product you're working on? I'm now going to introduce Joanna, who will talk us through the next steps. I'm now going to introduce Joanna, who will talk us through the next steps. These phrases allow for a smooth transition between speakers and keeps the meeting moving through the agenda as intended. Okay, so as we start to roll up towards the end of a meeting, drawing a meeting to a close will result in the inevitable summarization of the points discussed. To summarize a meeting, you can use the following phrases. To sum up, here are the key points we've discussed today. To sum up, here are the key points we've discussed today. Let's quickly summarize the main points of today's meeting. Let's quickly summarize the main points of today's meeting. Here are some of the key points we've spoken about today. Here are some of the key points we've spoken about today. Framing your summary with these phrases allows you to provide a structured close to the end of a meeting and clearly highlight the main points discussed. And lastly, as far as running a meeting is concerned, a few phrases to neatly bring the meeting to a close in a professional manner. To do this, you can use the following phrases. That just about covers everything for today. Thank you all very much for your time. That just about covers everything for today. Thank you all very much for your time. We will have to leave it there for today. Thanks to all of you for your participation. We will have to leave it there for today. Thanks to all of you for your participation. Let's finish there for now. I want to thank everybody for a productive meeting today. Let's finish there for now. I want to thank everybody for a productive meeting today. Using phrases such as these allows you to neatly draw a line under the meeting and bring it to a close. Okay, that covers all the expressions you may need for running a meeting, but I wanted to go one step further and highlight a couple of expressions that deal with just being a participant. In this case, let's look at a few phrases that allow us to offer an opinion, make a suggestion, and clarify something. So, when offering your opinion, you could use the following phrases. From my perspective, I believe that. From my perspective, I believe that. Well, from my side, I would say that Okay, now for some phrases to use when suggesting something. What do you think of? What do you think of? Perhaps we could look at the possibility of. Perhaps we could look at the possibility of. Could we consider the possibility of? Could we consider the possibility of? And lastly, phrases for clarifying. Essentially, what I'm trying to say here is that now, put another way, this basically means that what I'm saying here is learning these phrases allows you as a participant to interact with the meeting using clear and professional language. Be sure to drill these phrases so they come more naturally to mind when you next need them most. Finally, technical problems. In the world of online meetings, where would we be without connection issues, frozen screens, and complete blackouts? Here are some phrases to help you navigate the challenging issues of holding a meeting online. Now, if the audio is bad or non-existent, you could say, "We can't hear you. Your audio has dropped out." "We can't hear you. Your audio has dropped out." "Your voice is really unclear. Could you repeat that?" "Your voice is really unclear. Could you repeat that?" Now, if the image is the issue, you could use the following phrases. "Your screen is frozen. Could you reset your camera?" "Your screen is frozen. Could you reset your camera?" "You are all pixelated. I think there's a connection issue." "You're all pixelated. I think there's a connection issue." And if there is a complete breakdown in the connection, you can say, "You dropped out there for a second. Could you just go over what you were saying again, please?" "You dropped out there for a second. Could you just go over what you were saying again there, please?" Technical issues seem to have become a part of our daily life, so make sure you're prepared for the next time they raise their ugly head. Learning these aforementioned phrases will help enable you to keep that meeting moving along in the best way possible. And there we have it, a huge bank of useful phrases for you to use during your meetings. Whether you are running them or attending them, whether you are online or offline, these phrases will allow you to communicate clearly and professionally. Of course, I appreciate there is a lot to remember for this episode, so I've put together a fantastic one-pager for you to download and keep with you, ready to use at your next meeting. The link is in the show notes. So, with that, it leaves me to say that the quality of a meeting is directly related to the quality of communication displayed by the professionals attending. Use these phrases to communicate at your best. You've been listening to the Business English Podcast. Leave a review and let us know what you think. We'll see you next time.